continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios.
Insert Democrat socialist here.
Runs the Democratic House floor for 30 plus years running. He's promising this and he's stealing that. Where can you get that kind of money? He's using your house like his own piggy bank. You ought to know by now. You can pay off your house here in Illinois, but you can never keep up with the taxes. Oh, how it's always been the plan to have a taxpayer pay, no doubt. Not a matter of if anymore, but when you're moving out. I said when you're
Top of the morning,
out.
Dan and Amy. That theme music means it's time for our weekly conversation with Ted Dabrowski, President Wirepoints, wirepoints.org, all things Illinois policy related. And Ted and the Wirepoints boys have been doing some of the work that Elon and the Doge boys are doing at the federal level. They've been doing it at the state level, of course. And I'm particularly interested in this piece posted today about the amount of money the state of Illinois has spent on providing housing and health care to people in the country illegally residing in the state of Illinois. So, Ted, let's start there. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, good morning, Dan. Good morning, Amy.
And again, let me just say again, this is the state funding. So if you don't agree that the numbers we're about to talk through represent a pittance to becoming to, for the honor of being a welcoming state, then you have to confront J.B. Pritzker and your state legislators. You don't get to just content yourself by bitching about BLM Brandon because it's easy. Okay. Ted, please walk us through the numbers.
Hey, Dan, I was having a separate conversation just now about that. Everybody can hit on Johnson. He's the easy punching bag, right? And it's a game for everybody. But the harder hits are exactly like you said, against the state lawmakers, against Pritzker, because they're the ones that control all these billions. All right, so here's the first thing. We read the story yesterday as well. You mentioned it earlier in your show today about the closing of the San Diego Welcoming Center because they've had zero. Since the inauguration, they've had zero, new immigrants come in. It's the border closed is working, and those welcoming centers aren't needed. So they're going to, get rid of 115 people at that welcoming center. Well, it begs the question. We looked at Illinois. You pop in there, you go into the Department of Human Services, and you keep going down a few levels, and there you go. You see that one big line. Welcoming centers, $139 million, and that's just the welcoming centers, the little places that welcome. It's a massive number. Then you keep going further down and you see the $1.5 billion spent on health care for illegal immigrants. And I don't mean the asylees, the ones that have applied for asylum. They get Medicaid. So that's another bucket. And we haven't been able to find that number. But these other 40,000 who are in Medicaid-like product, we're spending $40 to $80 million a month on them. It's $1.5 billion in the last 2.5 years. Again, and it's all state money. There's no federal support there. And you're talking about Medicaid for adults 42 and older. So you're talking, and then you get to education, Dan and Amy. Education, we have no idea because we don't know exactly, across the entire state, right? They're in Rockford, they're in Elgin, they're in Waukegan, in Cicero, you name it. We've got a lot of illegal immigrants everywhere. And at a pop of $25,000 a kid is what it costs for us to educate kids in Illinois. Think about that. There's a supposed 530,000 illegal immigrants in Illinois. So how much are we spending on education for that? We don't know. We looked at the numbers for CPS, and the CPS gave us an estimate of how many kids might be there, up to 17,000. Well, that's $400 million a year on that. So the numbers are massive. And what we have to remember is that we're spending all that money and either raising taxes on all the struggling Illinois who already pay some of the highest taxes in the country, or we're cutting services or cutting money that should go to our really struggling citizens and residents of Illinois that are just being totally ignored.
So, Ted, in all, how much have we spent and how many illegal immigrants are living in the state of Illinois?
Yeah, well, the numbers that a group called FAIR, if I have the right name, they have it at over 500,000 illegal immigrants in Illinois. Of course, many of them have been here for a longer period of time, obviously, and many have come in the last few years. And we have to remember not to confuse the ones who are called the asylees who went through the process, signed up on the app, and all that. That's that 40 to 50,000 that came into Illinois on buses, et cetera. There's a whole other crowd that just crosses the border in Texas and somehow ends up in Illinois. So these are massive numbers. What we've been able to add up, and again, we can't add up everything because we don't have access to the numbers. Over $2.5 billion in the last 2.5 years. But
$2.5 billion out of what's the annual budget at now? 60 billion.
Yeah, 53 billion now. Yeah, well, there's estimates of 5 to 6 billion a year for Illinois.
And so, and so that the 2.5 that you can document, round numbers, but then you're, just to be clear on this, you're saying that doesn't include these huge buckets of expenditure that we don't have a full accounting for, like health care through the state's Medicaid program, and K through 12 education. You're estimating $400 million in CPS alone, but that doesn't contemplate the rest of the state.
That's right, and I'm not sure that even contemplates the non-asylee immigrants that are here. So the numbers are massive. I mean, that's really the bottom line is, and what COVID allowed us to do is just to increase all that spending in ways that we can't see, and line items we can't see, and that's again what makes the whole DOGE movement. And what's good news is that we're all now there's groups across, and I know Dan, you're doing a lot of that too with some of your groups. Looking at those numbers and getting to those line items, because the line items are sitting there somewhere. We just got to get to them.
Yeah, you would think that you'd have some motivated legislators to do some digging and some public demanding of full disclosure to take a page out of the not quite. We don't need protest songs and performative histrionics in front of the state capitol in Springfield, but we do need people. Other than policy wonks and radio talk show hosts, people that are actually in public office, perhaps raising a stink about this as well. That would be helpful.
Well, it would be. I tell you why, because, getting down to these line items, I mean, in theory, you've got, staff, all kinds of legislative staff that can immediately get these line items. They know what they're looking for and what they can search for. Mm-hmm. Much harder for us, but, I know some on your team, Dan, are getting some of those line items, and you did some reporting on that where you're seeing money go to these, quote, NGOs. A lot of times half of the money, more than half of the money is going to be government funding for, all kinds of stuff that shouldn't be funded.
Right. It's really building political infrastructure is what the NGOs, so many of these NGOs are set up to do. And surprise, surprise, most of them are staffed by card-carrying members of the left in the state of Illinois, as we talked about a bit yesterday with the Indo-American Center in Chicago. Updating us on the story we talked about a bit last week, and from the reports that you've posted on Wirepoints, I'm sort of picking up some optimism that I'm a bit surprised about. But I'm talking about the secession movement in Illinois, where nearly a third of Illinois counties have voted, non-binding resolutions to secede from the state. And now the Republicans that control the state house in Indiana have taken it up, like they'll red rover some of these counties over. But it's a little bit more complicated than that. So why are you optimistic that this is anything more than sort of conservative virtue signaling?
Well, I'm not optimistic that's happening. I think what I appreciate is that these people are speaking up. These people in these counties. Okay, let me back up. There's a whole bunch of people criticizing these counties for wanting to separate. Mm-hmm. And as I wrote yesterday, I don't support any separation of Illinois. I support on rebuilding this place in the way that it should be. Yeah. But that said, we have to remember that we have separatists leaving every day from this state, and they move to Tennessee and to Florida and Texas. We've lost 1.6 million people who've separated from this state by just leaving. These people that I've met, and I've spoken to the separatist groups, They're just everyday Illinoisans who said, we want to separate too, but I don't want to leave my home. I don't want to leave my farm. I don't want to leave my state. I just want to create a new one called New Illinois. And again, I appreciate their push because you know what? They're saying we don't like what we see in Illinois. We want change. And what's fascinating is that the legislature and Governor Pritzker ignore these people. And they shouldn't be ignored. It's why we have such a problem in Illinois. Is that this government only cares about the political elite, the government elite, the government class, and not about the ordinary class, the everyday class.
But do you think this is actually going to happen? I mean, there's 33 counties that Dan just mentioned. Do you really think Indiana's going to take some of them?
I just think the whole process is too hard. I mean, you've got to have Indiana approve it. You have to have Illinois approve it, congressional approval. What I see it more as is it's raising the issue. These people are struggling with taxes. They're struggling with this Chicago and Cook County power. But what I also think was funny too is that Governor Pritzker dissed the whole thing. He called it a stunt. And he said nobody wants to move to Indiana, which is then what it points out is, wait a minute, Indiana's kicking our butt on so many statistics, but on the fiscal, on the demographic, and we're losing. We lose on net people to Indiana every single year. We lost like 18,000 people last year alone. Indiana is rocking relative to Illinois, and Pritzker should, instead of behave that way, should say, hey, we're going to take on Indiana. But that would require him to stop lying, and that's all you have to do in Illinois. A president is you just lie to Chicagoland. You just tell them that things are up when they're down, and I don't know. That's where most people seem to be at. Just tell me the beautiful lies, because it's just I don't have the intestinal fortitude to confront the actual reality. Speaking of taxes, you mentioned it. So, is there any movement happening for? I mean, I know there's some rumblings. Now, is there movement yet for a structural tax increase in Illinois? Well, I think there will be. They're trying to figure that out right now. Pritzker's in a kind of a funny spot, right? He lost his progressive tax move back in 2020. And does he want to go through it again, especially if he, all these rumors of him wanting to run for president? Does he want to go with the tax hike again? That's a tough question, but I can tell you this, guys like Martwick and others absolutely want a tax hike. And so, don't be surprised to hear the whole progressive tax scheme come back again. They'll push for it because they need more money. I'll tell you, they have trapped themselves. They spent all that temporary COVID money on long-term giveaways, right? Vote buying, and now they're trapped. And so, do they cut spending? Do they cut back what they promised, or do they raise taxes?
Yeah, and I like a little bit of the cannibalization going on. Not that anybody's wearing a white hat in these fights; they're all villains. But Susana Mendoza, who has aspirations to be somebody someday other than the state comptroller, urging the city council to vote no on BLM Brandon's $830 million bond issue because I mean, to hear from the state comptroller criticizing some other government's finances, talk about living in a glass house, but because the city council, because the city of Chicago, I should say, is too the financial stability of the city is too precarious to support that level of borrowing one more time.
Yeah, she's again the easy punching bag is Johnson, but she's not hitting Pritzker for his projected $23 billion in deficits coming up in the next 5 years. And I think we have to remember, and Susana Mendoza has said some better things, but she's been part of the system all along, and now she's trying to take credit for the numbers in Illinois that were helped by the $200 billion in COVID windfall revenues. So I think we have to remember she pays the checks. She doesn't actually set policy. So for her to take credit for what she's taking credit for makes no sense.
Ted Dabrowski, president of Wirepoints, wirepoints.org, all things Illinois policy related. Thanks, Tim. Ted, excuse me. Yeah.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Hear about the big stories of the day, then talk about them right here on Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer. Gain insight into building strong marriages and raising godly children with Focus on the Family with Jim Daly each weekday at 11:30 a.m. on our sister station, AM 1160. Hope for your life.
You never want to miss one of life's most important moments, a graduation.